This is actually so perfect because this is relevant to the video. Happy New Year, everyone. Today is January 3rd, and I decided to treat myself to, you know, a little bit of food delivery, and I thought I was ordering from a cool new local grilled cheese place, only to discover it was IHOP the whole time. So if that was IHOP's goal, congratulations. But I feel like I've just been rickrolled, I've just been crisped, I've been all of it. And yeah, this is IHOP Arnold Palmer. Hello everyone, welcome. The last video I uploaded was, I'm pretty sure it was my Little Women reading vlog, which I filmed back in 2021, like March of 2021. I didn't upload it until March of 2022, which kind of really emphasizes how behind I've been with my editing, uploading, filming, and stuff. And so this is kind of a clean slate. New year, even though it's January 3rd. New year! The last time I filmed a video, honestly, was, I want to say last March. I started filming this vlog, but nothing came out of it. I planned out I was going to read these 3 books, but I only read one of them. 2022, reading year-wise, I kind of wish I did better. Something I realized is I am happier when I am constantly reading, and I'm also happier when I'm creating. For a while, for the past couple of years, I always thought that I was stressing myself out with this channel, so I gradually just kind of stopped posting because I was putting too much pressure on myself. I, thought like, oh, my videos need to have a certain amount of views, I need to have a certain amount of followers. I was constantly just trying to be like a better version of myself. Like I constantly felt this need with every video I put out. It had to be better than the last one. It had to earn more views. It had to do this, that. It had to be very creative. It had to do all sorts of things. And I just kind of realized that none of it matters. Like the success of my channel is defined by me and the content that I put out there. And so something I have been kind of toying with the idea of in recent years, and I think it's best shown in my little chain of iron out of context video I did, was just to learn how to do things for myself. Because I feel like, especially with social media and stuff, so much of it is so performative, so much of it is putting up a front, right? It's the mirror ball Taylor Swift talks about, right? I'll show you every version of yourself tonight. And that's, I don't know, over the years I've grown to have a very complicated relationship with social media, hence this channel and kind of the abandonment I've gone through over the past couple of years with it. I just want to create videos, I want to have fun, and that's kind of the vibe we're going for here. I just want to talk about books because I love books, okay? So, 2022 reading year, let's discuss it. 2022 was, in my opinion, I don't think it was the best reading year for me because I did not spend enough time reading for fun. In fact, the only reason I was able to even meet my Goodreads goal of 50 books was because I read so much for my English class this past fall, and to be honest, if I didn't read all those short stories, I would not have been able to meet my goal, so that's the honest truth. And as I mentioned earlier, I went through reading slumps throughout the year, like seasonally. I had a reading slump from like January to February, and then I had another one from like April to May, and then I had another one from September until December, and then we're here. Summer was a really good time for reading for me. I think honestly the best time for reading for me was honestly December 2022 because I really just allowed myself to indulge. I was reading whatever I wanted. I was having a blast. I just didn't care. And that's kind of the vibe that I really want to go into 2023 with, is this vibe of I'm doing whatever I want, I don't care, I am happy. And that's like the goal for this channel. That's my goal for my reading life. That is, I think, ultimately kind of like my thesis for 2023 is I just want to stop caring. I want to just go out, live my life, and I want to enjoy it. So without further ado, here are my favorite books of 2022. The first one we have here is I Was Born for This by Alice Oseman. I gave this 5 stars. It was the first book I read in 2022. Great way to start off the year. I love this book with my whole heart. It follows this boy band called The Ark, and it's dual perspective from the perspective of the like front man of the Ark and then one of the fangirls of the band who like runs a Twitter account. And it was just so much fun. As someone who grew up on like Stan Instagram and Stan Twitter, I just love that stuff, and it made me really nostalgic for like that era of my life. It brought a lot of good, warm, fuzzy feelings, which Alice Oseman does so well. Next, I have Love is a Mixtape by Rob Sheffield. This was actually one of the books that I was going to read for that vlog that I scrapped. Ooh, full circle moment. This is a memoir just about love, loss, and the music that we carry with us through our lives. How, you know, listening to a song transports you back in time, and how we associate people with songs. And it was so well written. I want to read more by him for sure. I know that he has like 2 other memoirs. This was really good, and it was the first time I really delved into nonfiction for fun. Prior to reading this, I had only read like memoirs and like nonfiction stuff for school, and so this was the first time I really got to indulge in nonfiction for fun, which I really enjoyed. Next, I have Conversations with Friends by Sally Rooney. I loved this. This is my favorite Sally Rooney novel. I have not read Beautiful World, Where Are You? The most recent one. I haven't read that one yet. But out of Normal People and Conversations with Friends, I am a Conversations with Friends girly through and through. I love Frances. The thing with Sally Rooney novels is whenever I finish them, I feel really sad. And I don't know if this is like a normal feeling or if this is just like me. I have this like feeling of like emptiness when I finish a Sally Rooney novel, which is why like I kind of space out when I read them, and that's why I haven't picked up Beautiful World, Where Are You yet, because to be honest, there are parts of me that are still recovering from Conversations with Friends. But I definitely preferred this to Normal People for sure. I loved it. I love Sally Rooney's writing style so much. I think it's so unique, and I just admire the way that she writes. Like, she's one of the few writers where I will look at the sentences she writes and think, how on earth did she craft this? Like, how did she write this? Next, we have White Cat by Holly Black. This is a part of Holly Black's like YA, little bit of mafia, little bit of magic series. I need to finish this series. I've only read White Cat. I have not read the rest. But White Cat was so good, and maybe it's because of the boarding school vibe, and I read this like in winter of last year, so I was living in the dorms, and so maybe it was just the part where Castle makes a mocha with the shitty dining hall coffee and a packet of hot chocolate, but reading that scene like really rewired something into my brain, like, because that's how I was making coffee in the dining hall. I read that and I'm like, Castle does that too? Like, are we soulmates? It 100% was just the vibes of reading this. I have the bind up of it. It's actually sitting on my desk right now, but I'm just too lazy to grab it. But I have the bind up of all 3 books. And so like lugging that big book like to class and stuff, and like sitting in the library and like cracking it open, it made me feel very like dark academia vibes, even though that's not really the vibe of the series. Like, it's definitely much more like mafia, magic vibes. Really, I don't think it is dark academia at all, but in my brain, it was The Secret History by Donna Tartt. Then we have a bit of a break, and then we have my hot girl summer era, where I read quite a few interesting books. So the first one we have here is Neon Gods by Katie Robert. This is a Hades and Persephone retelling, and you're gonna notice a bit of a theme here. I enjoyed this for what it was. I did think it was kind of silly how like the gods were also like deeply involved in like human stuff. Like, Persephone mentions like getting her master's at Berkeley, and I'm like, girl, you're a Greek goddess. Like, what? What are you even talking about? That's exactly what I loved about it though. Like, it was so crazy to me, but in such a fun way. And this may be because I grew up with Percy Jackson. This may be because I'm just obsessed with mythology in general and have been from the time I was, you know, a little girl. But I really love this book. I loved how indulgent it was. I was here for a good time, and it provided a good time. And that's all there was. But it was kind of funny, not gonna lie. Next, I have Something Wilder by Christina Lauren. It was cute. It was a classic Christina Lauren rom-com. There was a bit of an adventure in it, which I really loved. I know that some people didn't like the kind of romancing the stone, the lost city vibe to it, but I loved it. If you want a classic rom-com with a bit of an adventurous twist, this one, check it out. It's so much fun. So next I have Lore Olympus Volume 2. I love this series so much. It's so bad. I'm gonna talk more about it later because this is not the first time Lore Olympus comes up in this. Volume 2 was good, and that's all I have to say. Again, Hades and Persephone retelling. This one involves the other gods a little bit more than Neon Gods did. Neon Gods was very much like just Hades and Persephone and like kind of the more immediate gods surrounding them. Whereas Lore Olympus, you get everyone's perspective at some point in this entire series. It's not just Hades and Persephone, you get everyone. Again, I'm a Greek god kid and I love mythology, I love retellings, and this was just perfect. It was perfect. It like literally healed my inner child reading this. Gonna be honest right now. Next we have Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I'm just as shocked as you are, and I am speaking my truth today. I am a Malibu Rising stan. If you are new to me and my taste, I am not the hugest Taylor Jenkins Reid fan. I have only read, besides Malibu Rising, I've only read 2 other books, Evelyn Hugo and Daisy Jones and the Six. And Evelyn Hugo, I thought was alright. I vibed with it. My opinion of Evelyn Hugo has definitely changed over time, specifically because of how certain fans in the Taylor Swift fandom choose to interpret it. Not a huge fan of that. When I read Daisy Jones, I did not like Daisy Jones at all. I didn't. You can go back on my channel and probably find my video, but I did not like Daisy Jones, and over time, my opinion of Evelyn Hugo has soured a little bit because I think if I reread Evelyn Hugo right now, I don't know if I would like it as much as I did when I read it. But this book was so good. It was so good. It was so perfect. For me, what I really loved about this book was the family. It's the same reason why I love Succession. Like, no offense to anyone who watches Succession for the business part of the show, but that's not who I am. I don't care who the shareholders are. I watch it to watch the Roy siblings come together as a family. But Malibu Rising was the same kind of thing. Nina Riva is the female Julian Blackthorne, and maybe that's also why I love this book so much. I loved it. I loved every second. Every time I opened the book, it felt like I was opening up a gift. It was the most perfect book. My relationship with Taylor Jenkins Reid was relying on this book, because if I hated this book, I was never going to read a single book by her again. But of course I loved it. So what am I going to do about it? I think I'm going to reread Daisy Jones, because I do want to reread it before the show comes out. And I think that now that I'm older, I have a better perspective on things. I might be able to enjoy Daisy Jones more, because I was really young when I read it. I was like 15. So yeah. Next we have I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy. I don't think I need to speak much about this book because it's been everywhere. And it should be, because this book is a masterpiece. It's so well written. The way that Jeanette details every story, the way each chapter ties into the greater whole of the book and how it applies to her own life, genius. I listened to this book in the car with my mom, actually, and we were listening to it. We were going on a little bit of a day trip, and we were just driving around listening to it, and the whole time we were just so focused on what she had to say, because you should check out the audiobook if you haven't, because Jeanette McCurdy actually narrates it, and I love it when authors narrate their own books. I do. And it's just so good. It's so good. Of course, with this one, be wary of the content warnings. I don't know if this should count. I can't remember if I technically count rereads of my favorites of the year, but I'm gonna do it this year anyway. Next we have The Lightning Thief by Rick Riordan, or is it Riordan? Of course, this is book 1 in the Percy Jackson series, and I read this because we got news about the TV show and all of the casting news, and it's all so exciting, and I have really high hopes for the show. I'm just so excited, and I hope the show comes out this year. I know on Disney Plus right now it says it's coming out in 2024. I hope I don't have to wait that long. I hope it comes out this year. The Lightning Thief's so good. I did also rewatch the movie because, of course, Logan Lerman is Percy Jackson in my heart. I grew up with him, and I'm hoping he makes a cameo in the TV show. I hope to God. My hope is that Logan Lerman plays Poseidon in the TV show. Logan Lerman, if you're watching this, I hope that you're playing Poseidon in the Percy Jackson TV show. Next, I have my favorite book of the year, The Anthropocene Reviewed by John Green. This book changed my life. I feel like reading this book, when I did, it really changed, again, my perspective on life. It changed my perspective on art, on the stuff that I create. Like I mentioned before, I have issues where I put too much pressure on myself, and I tend to stress myself out even more than the situation requires. And this book really changed my perspective of art, why we create, and just kind of the human experience and what it means to be a human. And also the amount of Dr. Pepper I've consumed since reading this has definitely gone on an uptick. But I loved this book. I think everyone should read this book. Regardless if you're a fan of John Green or not, I think everyone should read this book. So next I have Hear the Wind Sing by Haruki Murakami. This is the first short story that Haruki Murakami published. And I read this right after I read John Green's Anthropocene Reviewed. And again, this is another one that kind of changed my perspective on specifically writing. And it wasn't so much the story itself, but in the edition I had, there was a foreword written by Murakami where he talked about his writing process for the short story in particular, because it was the first one of his that was published. What he would do was he would come home like from his job and just sit at the kitchen table and write. And it was that easy. And I just started thinking to myself, like, why the hell am I not doing that? Because I love writing, but I'm always putting too much pressure on myself. Reading this right after The Anthropocene Reviewed, where The Anthropocene Reviewed really focuses on the human experiences, what it means to be human, and how the art and the legacy that we leave behind one day may not matter, but it will matter in the moment that you put it out there. Reading that, and then reading Hear the Wind Sing, specifically the foreword where he talks about how easy it was to just sit and write. And so after reading both of those back to back, that's kind of where I got the idea that I need to rethink some things in my life, for sure. Hear the Wind Sing in particular reminded me, it had the vibes of a Sally Rooney novel, which I am all here for. It followed this guy, he was like in his early 20s. He sometimes visited this bar where there was this other character named the Rat. It was really good. And I know that most people don't recommend that you start with Hear the Wind Sing because the series that it's a part of is very like surrealist, but I love surrealism, so I just dived right in. These next two books, they're both on this list, but for the opposite reasons. So the first one we have here is Play It As It Lays by Joan Didion. So when I read this book, when I initially read it, I think I gave it like 3.5 stars because it was a little bit all over the place. The writing was a little bit confusing and difficult to get into, but nonetheless, I still had a general positive experience reading it. However, as time has gone on, because I read this book, I want to say like in August, September, as time has gone on, as I've sat and thought about it, I really love this book in my bones. And the reason I love this book is that it perfectly describes the place where I grew up. And the more that I think about it, the more I realize I carry so much of that book within me. Whenever I hop on a plane and I happen to land at a certain airport, usually it's at the airport that Joan Didion writes about and Play It As It Lays. And I sit at that airport and all I can think about is that book. And all I can think about is how well she wrote the feelings and the experiences that come with this place. I found myself underlining stuff. I found myself annotating. Like, I've started annotating books this year. I've started writing in them, which is something that prior to 2022 I had never done before. But I really just wanted to start leaving my mark on books. And, you know, I think it's kind of fun, like, when you pick up a used book and there's, like, annotations and stuff in it. And I went crazy. I underlined everything in purple pen. And I wrote, me, this is so me, this is just like my life, so many times throughout that book. And that's why this is on the list. So while it only received kind of a meh rating from me, it has to go on this list because I think about this book at least once a week in a very positive manner. The next book on this list is one that is a little confusing to me, but I have to put it on this list because I don't even know why, but I feel the need to talk about it, and I don't really plan on making a like least favorite books video because I'm done with negativity. So I gave this book 4 stars, but I just need to talk about it for a little bit because there's a lot of crazy things about this book. So that is my year of rest and relaxation. And I want to talk specifically about the timing I experienced from reading this book. I read this book right before I moved back to college. It was like the last book I finished before I entered my reading slump fall. Boo! Reading slump fall. It was the last book of my hot girl summer. This is like the opposite of the Joan Didion book, where the more that I think about this book, the more I think I don't like it, but I gave it a really high rating when I finished it, so it's on this list. But I need to talk about my reading experience about this book, because that's what you're here for. You're not here for a real summary of the book. You're here to hear about my experience reading it. I read this at a time when I thought it would be funny because I just quit a job that had caused me the opposite of rest and relaxation. And I thought, here we are, I'm entering a new kind of era in my life. I quit my last job. What better way to start off this new era than read a book about resting and relaxing? Well, I'm just gonna put up on the screen the dates that I read this book. So go ahead and take a look. And if you've read this book, you will know exactly what I'm talking about. So yeah, let's let it sink in for a moment. I read this book from September 8th, 2022, and I finished it, or at least marked it as finished on Goodreads, on September 12th. Which means I read this book on 9/11. That's all I have to say about it. The more that I think about this book, the more my feelings about it get very confused, because I did enjoy it. I gave it 4 stars when I finished it, but I really didn't like how it ended. I don't know, the more that I think about it, the more I have like negative feelings towards it. It's like the opposite of the Joan Didion book, where the more I think about Play It As It Lays, I think of it in a very positive light. With this book, it's the opposite. The more that I think about it, the more I think about it in a more negative manner. I don't know why, but I do. So then I fell into my reading slump fall, and I read a bunch of shit for class, and I'm not going to talk about that here because I talked about it in class. So why would I talk about it here? So jumping back into it, the book that kind of got me, according to Goodreads, the book that got me back into my reading groove was none other than Chain of Gold by Cassandra Clare? What? A Cassandra Clare book that is not in the Dark Artifices series that I reread? Who am I? Listen, new year, new cat. Apparently, there are certain things about me that I feel like everyone needs to know. The first one is, if I ever show any interest in watching the film Interstellar directed by Christopher Nolan, I am not doing well, and I am in no interest of getting better. However, on the opposite side of that coin, if I show any interest in rereading Lady Midnight, I am not doing okay, but I am going to get better. And so it was November, and I was texting my sister at work. We were just talking about Shadowhunters because we do that a lot. Most of the conversations I have with my sister are about Shadowhunters, or they're about TV shows we watch, or just stupid stuff, TikToks. And we were talking about Shadowhunters, and I was talking to her about Lady Midnight, and I was like, I'm feeling the urge to reread it. Like, I'm feeling it in my bones. Like, it's coming. Like, the Shadow Market Night was Kit's favorite. Like, I can see the prologue in front of my eyes, even though the book isn't here. And we were just talking, and somehow we switched topics. We were talking about like what Chain of Thorns might bring, Christopher Lightwood in particular. We were talking about Matthew Fairchild, James Herondale, Cordelia, Lucy, all of them. And we were just talking, and I was like, you know what, Bella? I'm gonna start rereading Chain of Gold right now. So I downloaded the book onto the Kindle app on my phone, and I'm sitting at work, and I'm reading Chain of Gold. What happens to me is I will often start rereading a book but will never finish it, and this happens all the time with Lady Midnight. If I'm rereading a book, I will only mark it as currently reading on Goodreads once I know I've reached a point where I have to finish the book. So like for Lady Midnight, for me, my stopping point is always when they order the vampire pizza. I know that once I've gotten past the part where Malcolm Fade walks up to the Institute and gives them the pizza, once I've gotten past that part, I know I'm in it for the long haul. So I just started rereading Chain of Gold because I'm like, you know what, I can just start rereading a few chapters, no big deal. I don't need to finish it, no pressure. But of course I got sucked into it. Of course I did. It's a Cassandra Clare novel, and at the end of the day, I love Cassandra Clare novels. I literally ended up like rereading it within a few weeks. I had a blast. I will say though that rereading this really emphasized the fact that I am a Chain of Iron girly at heart. I am not a Chain of Gold girly, I'm a Chain of Iron girly. But this was still a blast. I loved revisiting the characters, and of course I'm very excited for Chain of Thorns. Next, I have Black Swans by Eve Babbitt, which is another one of my favorite books I read this year. Like, I would say my favorite books I read this year were The Anthropocene Reviewed, I'm Glad My Mom Died, and it would have to go to Black Swans. I think. That's like my holy trinity of like best books I read this year. Black Swans by Eve Babbitt, I think is her most fictional novel. Eve Babbitt is known for writing very autobiographical fiction. I think Black Swans gets the furthest away from the autobiographical type of writing that she is usually known for doing. The stories in Black Swans were so good. Each one was so unique, but they all tied together, and it was just so well done. Between reading Didion and Babbitt's, this really jump-started like my sort of curiosity into reading about Southern California in like the 60s, 70s, and 80s. I fell in love with her writing. I fell in love with the setting. I fell in love with it all. I felt like I was there at the Chateau Marmont, even though I've never been there in my life. And I loved every second of it. And then of course, we're gonna end the year with Lore Olympus Volume 3 / the rest of the Webtoon series. I downloaded the Webtoon app. I kid you not when I tell you that the reason today is January 3rd and I'm not filming this on January 1st is because I've spent the last 48 hours in my bed obsessively reading each Webtoon episode of this series. I am so fucking obsessed with it. I love it so much. It's doing something for me. And I love Hades, I love Persephone, I love where this series is heading. The real reason I had to log on to Webtoon was because the slow burn in the first 3 volumes was killing me. It was killing me. I had to log on. I had to see what was in store. And I am so utterly obsessed with this. If you haven't read this series, I would highly recommend reading it on Webtoon, because Webtoon has like music and stuff with it. Like, it creates a whole ambiance when you read it. But of course the published editions are gorgeous, so do what you will. I just love it. I'm really obsessed with it. This comic does have trigger warnings for sexual assault and violence, and I think graphic language sometimes, so do your research before you read anything. Lord knows that I do. This is just a fantastic series and I'm obsessed with it. I literally have been telling everyone I know, like, I feel like I'm 12 years old reading Percy Jackson again, but it's with Lore Olympus. It's that serious to me. I don't really have anything else to say. I feel like I've talked everyone's ear off. I have so much to edit. I think I have like over an hour of footage, which I have never done before in a video. And of course the battery is now running low. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you'll stay with me in the new year. I'm excited to see what the new year will bring for everyone, but most importantly, I'm really excited to see what I'm gonna do creatively. So yeah, there will be more in store. Stay tuned.